I've been greatly fortunate with this audience. It's really not uncommon for a private message or even a comment under one of our videos to come down asking me to talk more about my fiction. I don't do that a lot on this channel, and maybe that's a mistake. I don't know. So after this video, please leave in the comments below whether you're interested in finding out more about what I've done if you haven't explored my writing. That's never going to be what this channel is about. I don't want you to worry that this is going to become a self-promotion channel. I've also never made any pretense to the fact that I started on YouTube as a means to get myself out there to an audience that might not otherwise find me. I love horror films as much as anyone out there I know. I'm not going to compete with you. You might love it more than I, but I love it a whole lot. Truth is, horror fiction is really where my main passion has always lied. It's been with me longer, and in those long days in my childhood living out in rural New Jersey, there wasn't a lot to spend my time. A movie would be a distraction if it was on television, but a movie would be 2 hours of my life. I could lose myself for days, or even weeks, in a book. So books have always been tremendously important to me. When I decided I wanted to be a writer, it wasn't lost on me that I was now responsible to give that same entertainment value. So I hope if you do decide to pick up any of my work, you do enjoy it the way that I enjoyed those formative books by people like Charles L. Grant and Stephen King. I also hope that we don't get stuck up on that name right there, Stephen King. King is a hugely important figure to me and to basically everyone who enjoys horror. But he's not the only name out there, and too often the media would have you believe that it's a one-man show. So whether you pick up something I've done or something that any of the writers that I've featured on the show have done, and please do, this is a curated show. It is important to me to only feature people who deserve your money and attention. So all the guests in the past are all worth your time and money. At the same rate, I did start the channel to promote myself to some degree. I hope being transparent about that makes it a little less icky. But today what I want to show you is a couple anthologies, 5, that have featured my work. These are short stories that appeared in a collection with other writers. And I'll tell you a little bit about each book and what it meant to me and the experience of it. The first is an anthology called Snuff Syndicate. Now this book came to me at a weird time because I would almost stopped writing short stories. Short stories take a lot of work and are not financially, let's put it this way, you'd make more money flipping fries than what you'll make for the amount of time you put into a short story. So the benefits do not outweigh the work. That said, I like writing a short story. Now and again, they're great palate cleansers, and there's definitely an audience for them. I just, these days, tend to conceive of stories longer, so I don't write a lot of them. So Snuff Syndicate is an interesting book because it came to me at a time when I thought I was pretty much done writing short stories for a while. And I was approached about this book by editor Keith Gorvey, and he had this concept for an anthology. In this case, it was a book about serial killers forming an online message board to give each other tips and tricks of the trade. And I'd always had this story in my mind, loosely based on the events of Columbine, about 2 kids that are isolated for very normal reasons. But because they are both fascinated by true crime, they convince themselves that they're apprentice serial killers, but they're really not. And basically they meet up with someone intending to go into the lifestyle, and it doesn't work out as planned. This book came out from beatingwindward.com. It's a fun read, it's fast, all the short stories are extremely quick, and I think that anyone that likes true crime, serial killer stuff will probably have a lot of fun with this book. That's Snuff Syndicate. Next, Dark Distortions. So Dark Distortions was edited by Molly Freese and C.D. Allen. The publisher was reading for 2 anthologies at this time, Dark Distortions and Traps. And I actually submitted to both. The story I wrote for Traps did not get accepted. That's a story called The Holiest of Sex Acts, which eventually did find a home, just not in the Traps anthology. But this was a great experience with me because it got me, I was in this book with people like A.J. Brown, who It's not a name you probably know offhand, but is someone I greatly respect. Scotopia Press put out a great value. This is a brick of a book, and at a $22 price point, it gave you a great chance to check out a lot of writers that you might not have known before at a really reasonable price, and from there you could go on to their novels, and I thought this was a great anthology. Next is a book that is extremely expensive to find online these days. It's called Bound for Evil. No slipcase. This is on faux leather with the gold embossing. This was meant to be the final word on fiction about dangerous books, magic books, grimoires. And it is an absolute monster as far as who is in this book. Everything from M.R. James, John Platt, John Platt was one of my very first sales. He ran a small press magazine that bought one of my very first short stories. Mark McLaughlin is in this. Who else? Jeffrey Thomas, J.G. Fagerty, Ramsey Campbell, a friend of the show, Ramsey Campbell, the great Robert Chambers, H.P. Lovecraft, Ian Rogers, Kurt Newton. I'm a big Kurt Newton fan. My story in here, Book van Namen, is an original that was written for the anthology. I submitted it blind, and it was one of the very last stories that was selected for the volume. Here's my warning to you. This is a great book with a lot of indispensable fiction from years gone by and newer stuff. And I can't say new anymore because the book's been out for well over 10 years. But it is an incredible book. Problem is, you're going to drop $100 to buy it at this point. It's long out of print. It is a extremely nice edition, and the value for it has just skyrocketed. And so it's a good book to put on the wish list. It's a good book if you get a gift card, but it's going to take a little bit of searching to find it. I think there might be a few copies on Books right now, but you're not going to find it cheap. If you do find it cheap, jump on it, because it's, even if you don't want to read it, it's a great value that you could turn into cash real quickly. Horror for Good. Now, Horror for Good was a charity anthology, and this book was edited by R.J. Cavender and Robert Wilson, and the table of contents here is just ridiculous. The fact that I'm in this class of people is just mind-blowing to me. Included are people like Joar Lansdale, Nate Southard, Lisa Morton, Ray Garden, Jeff Strand, Monica O'Rourke, Ramsey Campbell, Rath James White, Tracy McBride, Jack Ketchum, Lee Thomas, F. Paul Wilson. It's kind of one of those books that was such a big deal for me to get into. This was from Cutting Block Press, the earlier version of Cutting Block Books, who published my novel Blue Wheel. I had a running relationship with them because I had been in their horror library anthology series. But this was a huge deal, and it was a very, very, very prestigious book to get in. So I felt very fortunate. The most interesting thing about my story that's in this anthology is that Consanguinity is a story that was meant as a tone piece for a novel I was intending to write. I tend to write tone pieces, sometimes just fragments, sometimes full short stories, to kind of set the mood and atmosphere that I'm going for in a work. And then I use that as sort of a guide for writing the longer work. This story didn't actually end up getting parlayed into a novel. But the short story is really strong and really cool. It has a really great voice to it I was experimenting with. I think it's one of my better works. Sometimes you just realize the container is a short story after all, and there's not a novel there. Maybe someday I'll go back to it if I figure out a way to make a longer version, or at least borrow the tone that I created for this. You never know. Finally, and I've mentioned it, and I think I've even shown it on the air a few times, Darkness on the Edge, tales inspired by the songs of Bruce Springsteen. Now this is a deluxe edition from PS Press. edited by Harrison Howe. I knew Harrison from the Garden State Horror writers, and we had a friendship for quite a few years. That is definitely something I cherish. Life changes, and people come in and out of your life. You don't have to be happy about it, and you don't have to be proud of everything that was ever said when a relationship doesn't work. But this book came at a time when I really did need a boost in the career. I couldn't get out of the short story rut. I was writing stuff and it was selling, but I seemed to have hit my plateau at that time. And this book came along and gave me a resume piece that was really, really valuable as I started putting myself out there to book publishers for my longer work. This table of contents features Peter Abrahams, Guy Adams, Michael Arnzen, Gary A. Braunbeck, Lawrence C. Conley, Kurt Dinnan, Nancy Kilpatrick, Sarah Langin, Elizabeth Massey, James A. Moore, John Palisano, Tom Piccirilli, Nate Southern, Jeffrey Thomas, Lee Thomas, and the great and sorely missed T.M. Wright. The other thing that's cool about this book is all the copies are signed by all the contributors. So this is a very nice book. Again, for this copy, with the tray case and the signature sheets, you're going to pay some money for it. It is available on ebook now, I believe, and that might be the smart way to go if you just want the stories, simply because you are going to pay some money for this deluxe edition from PS Press. That said, I really can't say enough about the experience working on this book. It put me in touch with a lot of the folks that you've seen on this channel. It really was a moment for me, whereas I realized I could really do something, that I could be taken seriously. People talk about imposter syndrome all the time online. I never had that, but what I did have was the question about whether this high school graduate from New Jersey would be taken seriously when put against all these really great academic writers. And I'm very thankful that I've always come across people who have the best intentions, whether they're editors or fellow writers or publishers, that as long as the work is good and you're a decent person, they'll give you the opportunity. That said, it's competitive as hell, and if you're out there and you're writing at the beginning of your career and you don't know if you'll ever be in a book with your heroes, as I've been so lucky to be in, as well as talk them on the show, but if you are in that boat, here's what I'd say to you. Here's my big advice. Write as if it's a craft. Learn construction of stories and worry about that. The rest of it will come. Most submissions to magazines and anthologies are just not ready for prime time. So get ready for prime time. No one will ask the hard questions that you don't want them to ask if you just do the work on your side first. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed taking a look at these books. I hope this is not something that bored you out of your skull and you clicked off of the moment you realized it was a video about books. Let me know if you want more of this. I've been in about 36 anthologies and magazines, and I'd be happy to share more of it with you if that's what you'd like, but you gotta let me know. Thanks, I'll see you soon.